the Hall of Justice, mutated by cosmic waves.
All right, it's Bob for Talking Comics here at day 4 of the New York Comic Con, and we're privileged to be here with Chris Claremont, who had a nearly 2-decade run as writer of the X-Men and also co-creator of characters Rogue, Kitty, Jubilee, Emma. We can't say how many. They're all your creations. So thank you, Chris Claremont, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Oh, our pleasure to have you. Jumping right in, because we do have limited time here, how did the X-Men come to you after, the relaunch with Len Wein back in the 70s?
Well, Len was editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at the time. I was his associate editor, which meant basically I was number 2. My desk was right outside his office. So while he and Dave were plotting issue 1, I was kibitzing, listening, sneaking in, looking at the sketches going, this is so cool, this is so cool. Len snarling, will you get the hell out of here? On the other hand, I tossed in an idea when they were trying to figure out how to get rid of Krakoa. I came up with, well, why not sever the lines of force, anchoring the body of land to the planet, and let inertia and the lack of gravity do the rest. So the planet kept moving, and the Krakoa stayed where it was. So when Len decided to leave his he'd had enough of being boss and got an assignment of like the 4 top monthly titles. He didn't have time to do the 5th title, which was a quarterly at the time, X-Men, and asked if I'd be interested in writing it. And I said, hell yes. Chance to work with these characters, to work with Dave Cockrum. You don't say no.
So now, did you hide your enthusiasm, the sneaky you were doing before, and go right for it?
Damn near knocked down the door. There was no way I was going to let anyone else do this book, if I could get away with it.
Now, through the history of that book, you were certainly grandly celebrated, and rightly so, for your depth of characterization, particularly with the female characters through the book. Mm-hmm. Was that something that was part of that plan that you had in your head, that these were great characters, that you had somewhere you could go with all of them?
Well, that approach wasn't restricted by gender. I felt that way about all the characters. I mean, when you're dealing with such fascinating visual constructs as Aurora, Nightcrawler, even John Proudstar, Colossus, how can you not just be embraced by them and not want to present them in as full and varied a set of, a way as possible? And by the same token, it wasn't just them, it was Scott and eventually Jean. So, playing with the X-Men was playing with the ultimate Toy Story, I guess you could say.
Well, as always, it's about writing great characters, regardless of the gender or anything else. It's putting together a real, living, breathing person.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, I remember at the time, the death of Thunderbird, of John Proudstar, was shocking to everyone. Was that your decision?
No, that was Len's. I mean, the rationale was you do 2 things to achieve a meaningful death in comics, or in storytelling rather. You either build up the event, the character, the situation for issues and issues, months and months, stories for stories, and then have it happen out of left field, at which point the audience goes, holy cow! Or it's right off the bat when you're just getting to know everybody and it's the last thing anyone expects. And Len's feeling was, with a quarterly title, if he took time to build up the characters and make John a relevant, meaningful, memorable character in his own right, it would be years down the road, and there's no guarantee the book would be around that long. So his feeling was, his instinct was to opt for the immediate shock that you figure the character is going to be around for a while, and then suddenly you step off the cliff and it's like, holy cow, he's dead. And that's how it went. That was part of that was the thrust of issue 2, which then became 94 and 95, and I just followed his lead. And it turned out to be the right decision for a whole host of reasons, because part of the backlash from the readers is, well, they killed off John with issue 2. They're not going to kill off anybody ever again, especially not half of the second oldest romantic relationship in Marvel Comics.
Let's go to that. How would you describe, I mean, the negotiations or whatever from up front about, you know, Jean having to, a spoiler alert for
negotiations. We wrote the original story on the presumption that she would not die. Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief, read it, said, dudes. He did not say dudes. You cannot exterminate 6 billion people and get away with a slap on the wrist. That's genocide. You know, Eichmann didn't get away with it. Jean doesn't get away with it. Something's got to happen. Either she goes to prison for the rest of eternity, or she dies. And neither John and I were thrilled with this, and I wrestled with it for a weekend, and my feeling was I didn't want the book to devolve into, we have to save Jean, we can't save Jean, we have to save Jean, we can't save Jean, we do save Jean, we have to like lose her again and have her put back. I wanted the story to end, so you know, I killed her.
Now, I've read that the initial plan was a longer term, she'd be depowered.
Yes, but as Jim pointed out, she would be depowered and a little bit lobotomized, so she would be a more innocent character. And Jim's feeling was, A, it's comics, that never works. Something will happen, she'll be back to who she was in no time. And again, you cannot commit an act of primal violence, even if it was an accident, of that extremity, and not pay the price. Morally not pay the price. And as I said, it led to a rewriting of the last 6 or 7 pages, the fight on, you know, the epic on the moon. But the writing of those scenes was Jean coming to terms with the reality of what she did. And as she said to Scott, it would require me to be absolutely, totally, positively in control of every aspect of my conscious and subconscious and subconscious self for the rest of eternity. And if I ever slip just a little bit, who knows what could happen. And as far as she was concerned, as a moral person and, for better or worse, a superhero, she refused to be responsible for the death or injury of any other living sentient being. Better to end it, to close the door and say, I made a mistake, I have to balance the scale. And she did it. She ended her life as an act of heroism and courage. And as the Watcher said, she proved by her ability to turn down this ultimate gift that perhaps it's better to be human and moral and mortal than to become a god.
It's the operatic act of self-sacrifice. The panel you described, I actually had pulled out to mention. I'm glad I didn't just have to go with it. You did it yourself. While we're here, can we speak a little bit about Morata,
sure,
the She-Wolf that Titan has just reissued? What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a sword and sorcery epic that John Bolton and I did back in the day, originally for Epic. It's historical fantasy. She is the granddaughter of Julius Caesar. It is the start of Anno Domini. So Augustus is a young emperor of Rome, first citizen about to become an emperor. And as he's coalescing his power, word comes out of the east that there's this warrior woman who's the granddaughter of Julius. And this is the last thing Rome needs, you know, a legitimate heir. Because that would certainly muck up Augustus's plans and his wife Julia's plans, Olivia's plans. So, hence the opening scene is a Roman tribune trying to curry favor by capturing her. And things get crazy from there on. And the three stories had a great run. And our hope is, with the publication of this graphic novel, if it's successful, if there's a proper, you know, if it sells well, it might inspire Titan and John and me to do the next chapter in her life, which would be her return to Rome, and lots of shenanigans therein.
Well, with Game of Thrones and this sort of political drama doing so well, I can't imagine it wouldn't be a grand success that they would do it.
I wouldn't either, but you know, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, then it's a matter of the creators finding the time and the ability and the brilliance to come up with the right story and the time to produce it. So, fingers crossed, hope for the best, and as always, expect the worst.
Exactly. We tend to ask everybody this. So we're always interested in how people got started into comics and who their influences are, favorite collaborators, all that sort of stuff. Can we go down that road a bit? And how did you begin?
Basically, working for Marvel was a means of earning money between acting jobs.
Wow.
And then Marvel began paying a lot better and a lot more frequently.
So you were a comics reader early on, and just
I read when I was young, but this was English work, Eagle magazine. Sure. I got back into Marvel when I was leaving high school with Stan and Jack's work on FF, the arrival of Galactus in FF 48, 49, 50. Then Stan and Jack on Thor, Roy and John Buscema on the Avengers. It was all cool. Then I went off to college. My father threw away all my comics, including an issue of Action, where Superman tells John Kennedy his secret identity. Came out the first week in November 1963. Could have paid for my kid's college education with that one, but he threw it out.
We all have those stories, sadly.
And as I said, I came back. I was in New York working and started doing freelance for Marvel. And before I knew it, I was writing a lot, and then I got the X-Men and never looked back.
Did you take influence from Stan from back then, other writers out of the industry?
Stan was the one who hired me, so when I was still in college. But no, to be honest, most of my influences were theatrical and literary, not comics. I wasn't that familiar with American comics on a regular basis. Truthfully, up until Stan and Jack, I didn't find it that interesting. Yep. So it kind of grew with me.
Recently, we, for our book club, went through Days of Future Past, and people were really struck by the density of the storytelling, the amount of wonderful passages and paragraphs. So it's that literary influence, I guess, that put that onto the page for you. There wasn't just fill a word balloon with great Krypton and moving on to that you were trying for something grander.
Not grander, more real. It's like, these are people. They're not characters in a teleplay or a comic play. My vision of them was that these are real people in real situations. So you want to know how they feel, what they're doing, why they're doing it. You want to create a sense of the physical and emotional reality around them. You see things on a picture, but that doesn't tell you how things smell, how things feel, what might be happening out of view. It's trying to complete the vision so that you not only have what's directly in front, but you have a peripheral sense of what's off to each side, what's behind, above, below, and you move on through there. It's using the combination of the visual storytelling that these days is viewed as storyboards with the complexity and variety that you can bring in from prose, and creating a lasting, more comprehensive, hopefully more real impact on the reader.
You definitely created a world that we wanted to revisit month after month. They seemed as if they were part of our own family, and it always had that feeling.
That's otherwise why write the book?
Yeah, even the quiet things, playing baseball, which became such a wonderful part of the book, picnics and all just regular family things.
Well, again, real life. We're not talking about people who wear skin tights 24/7, who save the world, fight villains 24/7. They are people. They have lives. They have families. They have friends. They relate to events and circumstances that have nothing whatsoever to do with superheroes and saving the world and whatever. And yet you can find a way to take those events and weave them back into the overall thrust of the story. For example, a kid being a dick to Kitty at dance class becomes a launching element in God Loves, Man Kills, relating to prejudice between humans and mutants, and Stevie Hunter calling her on it, and Kitty calling Stevie on it by saying, "How would you feel if he called me a nigger?" And readers reacting viscerally to our use of the word. How could you say that in a comic? Well, because we're making a point. And it doesn't work if you don't make the point. Just because it goes back even further. I mean, Stan and Jack did a wonderful scene where Galactus is putting the ultimate nullifier or whatever he's used, Gizmo, on top of the Baxter building, and there's a shot of a cop and a news cameraman witnessing the scene. The cameraman's filming it and wondering if this is the last thing he's ever going to film. And the cop, saying, well, the FF are going to save, hopefully the FF will save us. Or, that's their part, we hope. It's taking something we can relate to in real life, per se, and weaving it into the comic, and thereby hopefully making a point of contact between the reader's experience and the comic character's experience. And it was something we were able to do, it seems, quite often and quite well.
Would there be one story arc or one issue that best represents, your thoughts and feelings about comics and the world in general and how they relate to each other?
Uncanny 94 to 279.
That's the best answer about anything I've ever heard.
It's all one story.
And I don't think we even go past that. I'll just ask this, though. Was there a character, either at Marvel or DC or anywhere else, that you never had the chance to write that you would have loved to?
No, actually, I think I wrote all the ones I ever really wanted to.
One of our correspondents is a huge fan of Valeria Richards, who you introduced. What was your feeling about that? So, sort of the riff off of what John Byrne had done, where Sue had lost a child, and you bring back a child to Susan Storm.
Well, yeah, except that her dad's Victor Von Doom. Figure that one out. Yeah, it was fun. And why should Franklin be the only kid? And part of the rule of writing comics is you take the status quo and you immediately throw in a monkey wrench. And in this instance, Valeria's whole point there is her presence reminds Sue of the child she lost. So the first 6 issues were total heartbreak, and Sue really angry. And it's even worse that she's Doom's kid. And it's like, you're telling me I have a child, I will have a child, and it'll be a child by Victor Von Doom? You. And Reed's trying to be rational about this because he's Reed. Sue doesn't want to be rational. She's ready to kill somebody. And of course, right in the middle of the conversation, Valeria walks through the door. And her mom is just saying, she's not my child. She is an abortion. Well, what 15-year-old wants to hear that from mom? So, you know, it's like immediately we push the car off the edge of the cliff, and Sue feels bad but conflicted. Valeria feels heartbroken. She doesn't understand. And then, of course, you come back 20 issues later, and suddenly Reed's the one trapped in the Doom armor, except he can slip in and slip out, and that's when Sue gets pregnant. And it's like, oh, holy cow. So her dad isn't Doom, it's really Reed. And of course the reader's going, I'm confused. And Valeria's going, whoopee. And then I got canned off the book and it all went to hell. But yeah, to me, that again, that's the fun, is you take something that in a way fits all the reader's expectations, and then you throw in a monkey wrench that totally screws it up, and you then spend a year figuring out how to fix it, seeing if you can play 1 or 2 steps ahead of the readers, and everybody comes out thinking this is a really great story, and what's coming next.
Stan always said, never give the readers what they think they want. Exactly. Sort of philosophy. Yeah.
Well, and I was taught by Stan, which is something I will never regret and never be able to repay properly, or thank him properly. But that's, you know, I'm here because he helped, you know. He said, sure, come on down, you're hired. Because I'd work for free.
In this industry, I think a lot of us would have that.
No, this is the pre-intern days. He hired me as a gopher. And, you know, I worked for Marvel when the bullpen was John Romita, Herb Trimpe, Maurice Severin, and Frank Giacoia. I mean, you can't get a better quartet than that.
It's a master class right there.
Well, and Roy Thomas was the assistant editor. Ha ha ha! And Stan was boss. And he, you know, you can't learn from better. And I like to think I did. We'll see.
Absolutely so. I think we're interfering with commerce a little bit. So let's just wrap this up. Where can people get in touch with you? You have a website or a
website, chrisclaremont.com, or on Facebook. I have a page. And that's it.
It's been our pleasure today to talk to Chris Claremont, the legendary author of the X-Men. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.